Guys, what's up? So I traveled down to the Caribbean this time with my Caribbean girlfriends, Shelly-Anne Tulia Scot and Shani Chambers. Shani's from Jamaica and Shelly-Anne Tulia, she is from Trinidad, same country as where I am descended from. They both graduated from the Caribbean School of Architecture in Jamaica. I was fantasizing about my life and what could have been. So if my mom and my dad did not come to this country, what path I would have taken. Would I have still done architecture, or would I have done something else? Would I have come up to this country, or would I have gone to London? What if, right? And another thing too that I learned from our conversation was how it feels to not think about racism. Because, in the Caribbean, it's more of a colorism than it is racism. It's pointed out in this episode, I don't like you because you're black. It's because I don't like you because you're you. Which is how it should be, right? You need to do me something. You need to give me a reason to do harm on you or to think less of you. And it's also caste system too, but that's global. This racism stuff is really mental, and it's purposeful, and it's dark. I've also been thinking about going down this path and how I need to protect myself in the future. So I don't want this podcast to become about racism, even though it's about Black and brown communities. But Black and brown communities isn't about just anti-white, or it's not about the segregation and the biases. I don't want it to become that way. I don't want it to be encompassed in my mind. With the debates and with everything else that's going on, I am super sensitive. And I'm super hyper, I'm super conscious of everything, and I hate that. I just want to do architecture. I just want to get my license, and I just want to do me. I want to draw. I want to create. I want to look at building materials. I want to, create a new system of some sort. I want to put a green roof somewhere. I don't know. I just want to be an architect. And this country is telling me I am less than, I'm not worthy. And it keeps getting at me. And it's so exhausting and so frustrating. I don't know how anybody else do. I don't know how other Black women are doing. I don't understand how you ladies are functioning. Because I am struggling to be exact. And I don't even want, another thing too is I don't want this podcast to be, even though it has become my therapy, it's not, I am a holistic person, okay? I don't whine and bitch and complain about things, I'm positive, I'm upbeat, I'm all this stuff. And the conversations that I have with my friends, these are my friends, is not, this intro is not reflective of it. We do talk about it and stuff, and listening to them and listen to their perspectives has helped me out a lot. But again, I don't want this podcast to go in this direction. I don't want it for you guys to say, oh, poor Melissa. I don't want, this is not what it's supposed to be. But it's becoming that way. And I need to start checking myself or doing something, because I can't go down this path all the time. I can't every week or so get on this microphone and I'm so, I don't want to do that. And I will make every effort to do that from now on. And it's not, is that, but it's also me, because it's not healthy for me. So I'm sorry about that rant, but it's a realization, because when I do intros, I just start talking. I may jot down key things from the interview that I don't want to forget and I don't want to miss. But other than that, I just hop on here and I just start talking, blah, blah, blah. It's it's what I'm feeling at the moment. I do apologize for that. But back to Shelly-Anne and Shani. So the Caribbean School of Architecture is at the University of Technology, and they both did their undergrad there, and then they both did their graduate studies at Florida A&M University. And then from there, they talk about all their transpires and stuff like that. So short and sweet. The next 2 interviews will be with journalists, actually, local journalists. Local, like, well, one is local, DC, and he's not really a journalist, more like a reporter. But I think I call him a journalist. Yeah, I said reporter. He's a reporter. And then the guy is I'm gonna say is a journalist. And then after that, I think I'm gonna chill for a little bit. There are 2 authors that I really want to go after, that I want to have a conversation with them. But I also want to be protective of myself, because it's going down like DC and gentrification and all that stuff. And the other one I'm not going to talk about, but it's along those lines of that area. I don't think I'm going to do that. What I think I'm going to do is talk to my friends. So I think that if, for those who want me to talk to architects, and I say I didn't want to talk to architects, but I'll talk to my friends who happen to be architects. So I think I'm going to do that, because I can't go down this path. Like, I don't mind talking to my friends about this path, because then we'll bring each other back up. And then, the election. I'm going to be a mess. Oh, man. Okay. All right. So I'll think about this to see how everything's going to flow. So, yeah. So here's the episode. Thank you, ladies, for doing this. I loosely wrote some stuff down. Loosely. Normally I do research, but
I was going to ask you if there was anything specific that you wanted to talk about, because I was like, maybe I need to do some research.
I know. I was like, let me refresh myself on the school.
Just remember back in the day when you were in school. So on the podcast, I've been doing this whole like world thing. So I've been talking to a lot of people in London. Mm-hmm. And from London, there's like people from all over, like from Africa to Middle East to like all that. And so then I hopped over to Canada for a little bit, talked to 2 folks there. And so then I was like, I'm neglecting my own people. I'm neglecting my own kind. So I was like, let me talk to the only 2 Caribbean women that I know in this field. So if you can just say your name and what country you're representing right now.
Right now, well, it never changes.
Not right now, but where you're from. Where you're from. Okay. How's that?
Okay, sounds good. My name is Shani Chambers, and I was born in Jamaica.
Cool part.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess
be specific, because this is Black community, so we don't.
Well, my birth certificate says St. Andrew, but otherwise, I would tell people I'm from Kingston. That's where I grew up.
And I am Tulia Scot. So I was born in Trinidad, born literally in Port of Spain, but grew up in Mount Hope / St. James. So yeah, that's me.
St. James. My family grew up in Belmont.
Oh yeah, that's close by. Yeah.
How did you guys pick architecture?
Am I going first? I'm not sure which one.
Yeah, Johnny.
Well, I guess it kind of was by default. When I was in high school, and by the way, I'll just shout out my high school, Campion College. And when you got to a certain level, I think it was 3rd form, you got to choose either languages or technical route. And so it was either between French and technical drafting. And I chose technical drafting. And it wasn't that I was not interested in languages, but I, at that time, had grown up seeing my father draw, and he actually did an expansion on our house. And I thought, well, let me try this out, because, I had an interest in it. And so that's what led me on this path. And by the time I graduated from high school, I I thought I had a technical future. And to me, the architecture was actually marrying art and the technical side, because in my family, we do have science folks and technical folks, but we also had artists. My father was actually a good carver, and he didn't really realize as much of the artistic side of himself, but I think he made an impact on my future choices, and he made me believe I could do whatever I wanted to do. And even though it was more of a male dominated field, to a certain extent still is, at least in practice, I chose that route. And here I am.
Yeah, I think mine was a little bit similar in that once I got to secondary school and did technical drawing, I was like, I have to do something with this because I loved it. But we did all the different types of technical drawing. So we did like engineering drawing, architectural drawing. And so once I graduated secondary school, for me, I was sold on languages. I was like, I need to do French, Spanish, technical drawing, and art. I was like, this is it. But my path sort of took me straight into a drafting program at our technical college. And so I did all the different types of drafting again, surveying, electrical, woodworking, all those types of things on the technical side. And from that, I was like, that's it. I want to be an architect. I think from early on, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And that's almost like the only thing I wanted to do. I couldn't think of anything else that I wanted to do outside of architecture or photography. So the next question was trying to figure out how to pay for it and actually how to do it. So it took me into interior design first, and then by round the way into architecture. So that's kind of what took me to where I am now.
How did you pick your school? Okay, so let me go back. And this is part of what I know and don't know is apply for school, but it could be free, right? Am I?
Not for me. I think in Trinidad, at some point, university was, it was free for a certain period of time, not during my time, but it was free if you were going to UE.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I actually accidentally happened upon UTech. I didn't know anything about it. So I did my associate degree in interior design in Miami first. And then I was back home. I was like, oh, let me apply to Canada, America, all these countries. And, it was going to be a longer program, like a 3-year program or so. And so my mom was watching TV one day and they were talking about, the Caribbean School of Architecture. She's like, oh, look at this, you should apply here. And I was like, oh yeah, let me check it out. And so that's kind of how I found out about it, by accident from my mom watching TV. So kudos to the TV station for talking about it. So yeah. And so I did my last 2 years in Jamaica. So they accepted my first 2 years of associate degree, and then I did my last 2 years for the undergraduate program.
Oh, good. How about you, Shani?
Well, it wasn't free. Let's set that record straight. But unlike Shelly, who was a globetrotter before she came over to my side of the world, there was only one school in Jamaica, or at that point in time, there probably was another program in the Caribbean. I wasn't aware of it. But the Caribbean School of Architecture was literally a half a mile from where I lived. So I'm like, free boarding, a little bit of exercise, and I'm right there. And so to me, I had passed the university a number of times, and I think UTech was kind of like the lost stepchild, because UE was always this kind of shiny beacon for the university system in the Caribbean. But UTech, which was formerly CAST, stepped up, but they had a kind of diamond in the rough, which was the Caribbean School of Architecture. And a lot of people didn't know about that school, but it was very international when I started it. And when I started going there, and when I say international, really it was more European. But the school, I think, was started in the 70s, and it was through some Commonwealth program. And a lot of the faculty were from Europe. And so, you'd never expect it. But, I'm walking in the school, I'll have classes with faculty from America, from Italy, from Denmark, Africa. I mean, our faculty was very diverse. And even the Jamaican architects that were there, or faculty that were teaching there, they had their education at the AA. So it, or at that point in time, for all intents and purposes, I felt like our education was kind of based on a kind of European way of teaching architecture. But what I thought was fabulous about the school, which it's changed somewhat since. And I don't know, Shelly, when you started, but I started in 1994. And our program was set up on a module system, not on the semester system. So you'll do maybe, I don't know, 2 months of a course, and then you'll switch to the next one. So it wasn't really set up on like similar to the American system, which is per semester.
Some of them do. Some of them do have quarters.
Some of them do. Okay.
Yeah.
The classes that we had, and having experienced both the American system and the Caribbean system, I kind of look back at the school as, wow, really, to me, it was really a diamond in the rough, because the things that we did and learned were just so varied. It was normal for us to take foundation courses in painting and drawing and literature. We were taking some courses that were not necessarily part of your normal architecture program, and I thought that was really great. And we didn't have as many resources as a lot of schools did, but we certainly made do, and a big resource for us were our faculty. I mean, at that point in time, the internet was, it was not as accessible as, it certainly was accessible at our university, but not necessarily everybody had it at home. Mm-hmm. And when we started learning AutoCAD, we were doing it in the MS-DOS. I remember typing on my computer. And I'm just thinking back now at that, I'm like, wow, how has time changed? But anyway, that was the first time I was even exposed to African architecture. We did a 2-month module on African architecture. And I swear that course just blew my mind. I was like, wow. Because at that point, I was, we knew about Caribbean architecture, and we knew about European architecture too, but not often did we really see this kind of a spectrum or a history of architecture, or from more traditional to more contemporary. I mean, that was my exposure there to African architecture, because before you think to yourself, okay, well, yeah, they're kind of like us third world countries. They're kind of struggling. They're, doing what they can with the resources. But I mean, it took us from the mud-covered huts to the very contemporary high-rise buildings. And I was just kind of blown away, because I'd never didn't really think at that point in time there were these big contemporary modern cities. And I loved it. And I thought to myself, well, first of all, my faculty member who was teaching me that, he was a white European. I'm like, how is he teaching me about this? I was very grateful. And the funny thing about it is that, I mean, when he came to our class, he had slides, and he was like always carrying a suitcase with him. You remember Sneller?
No, he was there before my time.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Well, that was his name. I remembered that. Wow, I'm surprised. And these were slides of photographs that he took. It's not like, okay, let me go in this history store here and buy these slides, like a lot of history teachers do. I mean, these were photographs from when he actually lived and studied in these places. And I was on the floor. I was just like eating it up. I couldn't believe it. So, I mean, and that's stuff that, and having taught in a couple of American universities, it's not that these things don't exist or they don't have access to them, but they're not. And again, my view on this is probably limited. I've only taught in a few architecture schools, but I think we, even in minority schools, I mean, I actually hadn't seen that, and I felt fortunate. And I felt fortunate to learn about painting. I fought in various styles and being taken on our little trips. I mean, and this is just Jamaica. We have access to all these. We just jump in a car and go by the river and start painting. You know, you remember West Martin?
Yeah.
You know, I think she still teaches there.
Yeah,
Maybe
did you
she's
do the
retired.
dance studio? Because everybody always talks about
Oh
the
yeah,
dance.
I mean, we did all kinds of stuff. Yeah, performance. I mean, we did all kinds of stuff, and it wasn't so much. We were enjoying ourselves because it was part of it was exposure and the novelty. You know, standing up there painting with bamboo sticks, and these are probably things that art students normal part of their everyday, but it was unique to us as architecture students because I don't even know if I was even fully aware of what kind of education to expect, but it certainly wasn't what I was expecting. I was thinking, okay, well, I'll just continue drafting. That's probably what I thought I was going to learn, some history, and okay, I'll do some design. But the reality is our first 2 years were really good foundation years. And then I think Shelly-Anne, I don't know if it changed when you started.
No, mine was different because I only did the last 2 years because I took the first 2 years, all those foundation things came from my interior design associate degree. So I only did the last 2 years of that program. So we were already into sort of the architecture focus at that time. But I think for me, some of the greatest memories that stand out were the study tours. And so I know schools do study tours and semester abroads and all that here, but what I found was exciting about the one in Jamaica was that it was very immersive. Like you went to a destination. So my 2 study tours, one went to Grenada. So we spent 2 weeks in Grenada, lived in a community, walked the town every day, talked to people, came up with a design project, and then presented it before the community. The next one was to Puerto Rico. So we did the study of Old San Juan, sort of the parks, the spaces, the public spaces, how they dealt with architecture, how architecture embraced the street, all that. And then we actually presented it at I think it was the University of Puerto Rico to the students because they kind of taught in English anyway. So they understood us, we understood them. But I think for me, that was like some of the happiest moments being on the study tour. Because it's almost like you went there and you lived the life and the culture before you designed something, as opposed to, hey, here's your site, do some history, do some investigation. It's like we felt like we were like Puerto Ricans or Grenadians by the time we were doing the project. We're like, oh yeah, remember the little shop down the corner where we had this, and the way that they use the shop and this, and we were like, yep, we know the streets like the back of our hands. And of course, Jamaican students. Of course, I'm Trinidadian, but the Jamaican students had to find a dance hall club in Puerto Rico. They were like, yep, where are we going to party? I was like, so somehow they found the one dance hall club. We went there one night. So, I mean, it was a lot of fun because it's like, for us students, it's like you were living in the space. And while you were there, you had to find tools and different things to make models, to sketch. You were like sketching over the dining table in the hotel. People were spread out on the ground, So to me, that was like one of the happiest moments. It's like, I remember one of my friends, like I would tell her like, yep, we can't be in Grenada and not go to the beach. So we woke up like 6 o'clock in the morning. We were the only ones on the beach, went to the beach, did all that, and then came back in time for the class to go out and walk and do our sessions. But I think those were like some incredible opportunities right there to do that. But what I would say, Jamaica was very we were all more pragmatic in that we had to be more resourceful and use whatever we found. So like, I think the difference is like seeing schools here that have, now all the laser cutter and all these things, we had to make things from scratch. And I mean, I don't want people to think, oh, it's a third world country, that's why you're doing that, whatever. But we had to investigate, found objects, do different things, cut up chipboard by hand. I mean, it was real. I remember some nights in studio late, somebody might accidentally slice their finger and it's like, oh my God, don't let the blood get on your model because you're gonna have to start over. So it was like real life, down and dirty. People had their coffee pots, little mini stove in studio, and it was like living in studio, living that life kind of. So I know our first project when I came in, the first project essentially was to design a place to work and sleep. And so that was the awakening to it all. So some people design a little bed underneath their studio table. Mine was above, so I would climb up the ladder and go up into it. And so that was the beginning of the cultural experience of being in studio. Because it's now, we all had a place to sleep. So it's kind of like, some of us are like, hey, we just go home to shower and come back because, we good. So, yeah, but it was an awesome experience.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think well, I don't know if it happened after you left, but no, they built the next wing. I guess they got funding and built another wing. But before it was set up like a motel, all the classes just kind of exited on an open corridor. And you didn't get your own spot until you were in third year. So the first and second year students essentially had to roll up everything that they were drawing and then go find somewhere else to go be to finish their work. But when you're in third and fourth year, you had your own spot. And so it was easier to do some of the things that Shelly is talking about. And, the building was kind of crotchety, and there was a little stair that hung off the side of the building. And mark you, our school, and I use that term loosely because it really probably consisted of 7 rooms at that time. It was part of a bigger university, but our architecture program probably existed in maybe 7 rooms. And I remember there was a little stair hanging off the side of the building, and we were on the 3rd floor. And that was the only, and we probably shouldn't have been doing this, but we were going on the roof. You were doing that, Shelly?
No, I think they banned that because we had an incident with somebody on the roof.
They fell off?
No, I think it was it was a situation that they stopped people going on the roof.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we would go up there like 5 o'clock in the morning and watch, sit there and wait for the sun to rise. I remember doing that, because the school itself is right under I guess if you continue going up to the mountain, you get to the Blue Mountain, but there was a huge mountain there right beside the school in Papine, and there was a part where you could just get on top of the roof and watch the sunrise. And after a long night working, I'm feeling reminiscent because it's been a while I haven't been back to Jamaica, so I just remember some good times. Anyway, they have a new building now, so that's great.
How was the transition from when you went to FAMU? Was there a transition? Was it like nothing? Or
I think for me, it was I guess a bigger transition. Because yes, I'm Black, but I think it's almost like, I guess culturally, Caribbean Black is a little bit different to African American Black. So for me, everybody was like, oh, HBCU. And I didn't really even know what the hype, like I know it was a Black school, it was great. But for me, it wasn't like, oh yeah, like all these things. So it seemed almost like I was living an alternate life when I first went. I was like, wow, this is like the music videos and the other things that I saw on TV. So it's like, oh, okay, now I'm experiencing that. But I think, and it might be universal to architecture programs wherever, it's almost like there is the university and then there's the architecture program. And it's almost like you spend so much time, it's almost in your own like community, network, whatever, within the architecture building that you got to make time to go out and experience the rest of the school. So, because I went for my master's program, I think if you're there like just undergrad, you have a lot more of the school experience versus the architecture building experience. Because I know before I came, there were t-shirts that said the lights never go out or something like that as well. So, because that was the one place in the school where students were always like all hours of the night. So it was an interesting experience for me, but it was great to sort of build that camaraderie and to still have it coming in late just for masters, with most of the students already being there for undergrad as well and knowing each other.
For me, the transition wasn't a big deal. I think at that point in time, I'd already been in the country. I had worked in an architecture firm. And so when I decided to go back to get a master's, I think I was a lot more serious career-wise about getting a professional degree. Because when I graduated from the university in Jamaica, it was a Bachelor of Arts. Hold on.
Yeah,
am I lying? It was a Bachelor of Arts in Architectural Studies. So it wasn't considered a professional degree yet. And so I think when I made up my mind, okay, I'm serious about architecture now. I went back to do a master's, and I think I was very focused. I don't know that I participated a whole lot in student life. outside of the building, I was more focused on just getting in and getting this degree. And I was super excited about what I was doing. You know, I had the faculty there to support what I was doing, and I think I was just so focused. I didn't really spend too much time engaging in social activities. I mean, Marky, I wasn't a square. I did go to a club or two, but I think I was a little bit
Polygon.
older. Pardon?
Do a polygon.
What's that?
Oh,
A
a polygon.
I'm a polygon with a couple of openings, maybe. But yeah, I just was so excited about what I was doing. I was really focused on getting in, doing what I needed to do and get out. I think I was a little bit older than some of the students going into grad school, and maybe that made a bit of a difference. But, you know, I didn't find the transition.
What was your thesis projects? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay, it wasn't that important then. It wasn't life-changing.
Mine was about cultural space and sort of these spaces, the interstitial spaces in between buildings, and how the buildings engage street and other public spaces. So I actually I looked at that, and it's horrible that I can't remember the names, but this long boulevard in Mexico, as well as the one in Barcelona. And then I compared that to the Brandauer Promenade, which I think is one of the greatest things in Trinidad in terms of public space in a downtown area. So it's this long plaza that essentially stretches from the waterfront up to the cathedral. But I think I was like Shani too, in terms of school. By the time I went to my master's, I was like, gonna get this done, 2 years for this thing, get in, get out. So I think a lot of people were still having fun, not too much, but still, you know, like in that sort of youthful thing, like college years. And I mean, I was to some degree, but I was like, college years, get these degree, get out, become an architect, keep going.
I mean, you had your fun in undergrad.
Yeah.
No, I got mine out in my 30s. I had a delayed reaction to youth.
No, I think
all the boxes and now you can relax, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they did have what they call socials in Jamaica. It was like these fetes by different departments as well. I think, isn't that what they were called, Shani? Socials or final fet or something?
I said I did my partying in my 30s.
No, but it was a lot of fun.
No fets up here. So what'd you do, Shani?
Huh?
There's no fets up here. What did you do?
When? In my 30s?
Yes.
Oh, it was all about salsa, baby.
Oh yeah. She did love that song. So like, yeah, I remember. I used to be like, "Oh, Shani, you going to salsa?" She's like, "Yeah, this is on Monday, this is on Tuesday, this is on Wednesday."
Yeah, I was partying 3 nights a week sometimes. But you know, I mean, there were fun. Hey, you have to find you find your madness, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when I found mine. But my thesis, mine was on textiles and architecture. I still haven't gotten away from that. It's still there in my heart. I've been part of weaving guilds for the past 20 years, different ones.
A big
piece of equipment in her living room.
Yeah.
Yeah, my loom. Well, right now I have a smaller living room now. I only have my spinning wheel, but yeah, my loom is in storage right now, unfortunately, but I'm working on getting a table one. If I can find some time away from working on my deadlines, that would be great. Yeah, but yeah, that kind of was my area of focus in college.
Did you take Miss Goodwin's class at FAMU or?
Yeah.
Oh, you did? That was the one I missed.
She still does workshops. Shout out to Professor Goodwin.
Yeah.
When was the last time you went back home, Shani?
Oh my gosh. 2007? No, 2008. So it's been over 10 years.
Wow.
I know. Drives me crazy.
Her family is here, so I guess that's why. Yeah.
No, that's not a good reason. I mean, I think about it all the time, and it's funny, you know. I always feel nostalgic and guilty, and this is probably something that I think anybody who comes from a different country and settles somewhere, you have to end up finding that place, because you're kind of you always feel like, well, I always feel like I'm in between homes. You live here, And it's where you live. It's where you live. In the US, I was born in Jamaica, and that's my home, and I feel very nostalgic about it. But I know that if I go back, transition for me will be hard. Not that it's not possible, but it will be difficult because you've been taken out of an environment, and your lifestyle is a little different. And you're living in the United States, and it has given you opportunities and allow you to live a kind of a lifestyle that you were looking for. Most folks move somewhere because of opportunities, but it's not where you grew up. While you're here, your history here kind of starts as an adult. You don't have pre-adult years in this country, and so you feel like you're starting somewhere.
The whole reason why I got into architecture is how I grew up. I grew up in projects, and the only reason why I decided to become an architect or study field, whatever, is because I thought I could make a difference. I didn't want anybody to live the way that I grew up in. And then my mom too, she likes to build things. Her being from Trinidad, she grew up, there's like outhouses and, take some corrugated steel, put it on the roof, 2x4s. You build your own thing. She grew up that way. You build your own stuff. Mm-hmm. So that kind of touched me too. But now I'm examining how I grew up. I'm examining all these things. I see things differently now. So I'm wondering, curious, when you go back to Trinidad to Port of Spain, what has changed? And even the kind of a little bit going on all over the place, but I know in Trinidad, like over by Savannah, there's that art center, theater thing.
Right.
The buildings you see in Trinidad were built by foreigners, at least the architecture.
Well, I mean, there's still some good ones, because there were some big firms that did a lot of work back in the day. Like one of my favorite architects was Colin Laird, and he recently died. So he did like the main library downtown. And so that is one of my favorite buildings. So he did the promenade, and he did the National Library downtown. And so I think going back, I sort of look at the architecture in different ways. Like, so there are some buildings that I consider progressive, and it's like, oh, wow, this is cool. So like the library is one of them. He adapted it to the site and the sort of the niches and like different areas that you could get into the library and sort of have different vantage points of the city while studying. So I look at it from a spatial quality and how I feel in the space. And I think that's kind of the same for traveling anywhere. So like anywhere that I go, I am like 90% occupied in like the architecture and the culture. For me, that's a big thing. So last year, I was able to go to La Sagrada de Familia for the first time. And I was like, oh my God, like I'd wanted to go there for 10 years. Right. And so it's like, anytime I go with friends, they're always like, oh my God, every detail. It's like, can we just experience life? Like, why are we looking at the ceiling? I'm like, oh my God, look at the structure. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? Like, the food is good. So I think I always get focused in on that. And so it would be nice, I guess, one day to go home and work. But it's almost like I feel like I missed the boat of fitting in. So I graduated, and the choice was either immediately go back home and try to fit in and work, or stay here and get licensed. And so since I stayed here and got licensed, going back home is almost like a transition, because they require you to do an exam again and have an interview to get registered in Trinidad. And I'm just like, look, I had enough with exams. I'm good to go. So I'm like, can I be grandfathered in, and then I could come work on some projects? But I mean, it would be great to collaborate with somebody and do a project in the Caribbean. So I think I had a mix of both, because I did actually work in the Caribbean for a bit before coming to do my master's. So I mean, it was a really good experience, because I worked in Trinidad and then I worked in Barbados. And so in Barbados, I worked on like one of their big tourist attractions is Harrison Cave. So we worked on like the visitor building for that project, a mix of projects like tourist attractions, office buildings, mixed use developments. And I know people here like to say, oh, that tropical Caribbean architecture. And, there always is what really is Caribbean architecture, right? Because it's a combination of being infused by so many things. Because like Trinidad was occupied by, the French, the Spanish, the Dutch, everybody. So there's a little piece of everything in there. But that's one of the things I miss, is sort of the cultural infusion, because there is that here, but I feel like it's approached in sort of a different way. Like at home, everybody celebrates everybody's culture, right? So if it's Diwali, It doesn't matter if you're Indian or Hindu, it doesn't matter. You just celebrate it, you know? So I think that was one of the things I'm like, hey, how can I experience all these seasons and all the festivals, like at least for 1 year, just get that infusion again to like fill me back up. So one day when the pandemic is over.
When the borders open.
I think that probably would be, as Shelly-Anne mentioned, a collaboration. As I mentioned, the vein I was kind of going on before, which is you feel a slightly an outsider in both places. It would have to be a collaboration. I know that one of the things I thought about was at some point reconnecting with the School of Architecture, because I do think that the things that I lacked or didn't have when I was in school, certainly resources, maybe that's something I could contribute to, seeing where I could fit in. And I really haven't had conversations with them about this, but it's certainly been on my mind to reach out and be supportive in the educational system there, because it was the foundation of my adult life. I don't think I would have been where I was or had the openness of mind if I hadn't had those experiences there, because they were great experiences. And it took me into graduate school, because really the basis of the work I did in grad school and beyond in education came from Jamaica, came from that exposure to the arts. I remember walking through the Edna Manley School of Art. That was the first time I saw my first loom. I had to walk through the textile department to get to our drawing class. That was always my shortcut. So who would have thought 10 years later I'd have had my own loom?
What is it about textiles? The feel of it and the fact that you're using your hands a lot, is that you're creating something. Like what is it about textiles for you?
Well, to me, it's like any other form of art. It still has, you still have the foundation, pattern, scale, repetition. All of those things apply to these various forms of art. And so it makes the transition from one discipline to the other not that far-fetched. And it's those similarities that I thought I wanted to explore. My interest, so I think like architecture, it's an aesthetic thing. There is something pleasing to the eyes, and there's a rationale to why something is pleasing to your eye for all those kind of basic foundational characteristics: repetition, form, color, texture, all of those things. But what I did see that's also in addition to that is there's something very technical about it. I mean, architecture is aesthetic, but there's a technical side to realizing the aesthetics that whatever it is that you're seeing and appreciating. It exists because there's something technical behind it. It's not built by appearing, it's built by an understanding of the math and the technique of constructing something, and the material choices and the properties that are inherent in that. It's the same with textiles. I mean, to weave something, I mean, there are different forms of making fabric, but for me, weaving specifically, there's a technical aspect to it. It's very technical. And I mean, there are parts of it that I hate doing, really. I mean, like dressing a loom is probably the most difficult thing. It's not difficult, but it's a physical labor. But there's a lot of planning. There's a lot of that requires you to think about how the yarns go together, what colors you're using, what the treadle pattern, what pattern you're following, what's the expectation. You have an expectation of what's going to happen once you complete it. Like architecture, there are a lot of surprises along the way, but I mean, it requires a lot of planning and prep work. The aspects of it that are connected to architecture, they were one and the same back in the day. What people wore and what people used to build their homes were probably one and the same. They came from trees, I mean, when you think about it, whatever we wear come from plants, cotton, wool, whatever or animals, I guess. And it's your environment, things that you take from your environment, you manipulate it to make whatever it is. Requires an understanding of structure, not only to make the fabric, but also to make clothing and to fit around your body. So to me, there were so many ways of exploring the similarities between the two. You could utilize your understanding of one to further an understanding in the other, or use your understanding of architecture to explore something in textiles, to explore something in architecture. No, I'm working on a project that has these metal panels and it has a pattern. And I thought to myself, how the hell am I going to figure this thing out? And then I thought, what the hell are you talking about, Shani? You know what to do. You have a background in textiles, a little bit of background in textiles there. And when it comes to figuring out the pattern of how you want these, here it is, maybe this is the way to go. Use your understanding of how you would plan a pattern in a fabric to look at how you want the aesthetics of these panels to occur on the building. So for me, it started in Jamaica and it's not left me.
You want to talk about your journey of exploration through India?
Oh boy.
Didn't you go to do some investigation of fabric? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. See, when we start conversations like these, it just gets me depressed.
Why?
What?
Why?
Because all of the zeal and excitement I had about architecture and textiles are no part, are not as part of my everyday right now as I'd like them to be. And when I start thinking about these things, I keep thinking, Shani, you've disappointed yourself. Look how far you should have gone with these things by now.
No.
But I went to India in 2011 because at that point in time I was at a place in my life. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I graduated, I worked for a bit, but I was a little disappointed in myself because I had thought once I graduated I would have gone off. I started on a path of teaching and I thought, okay, great, but now I need to go into practice and really see how I can push this agenda. And then that's kind of where it stopped. And I was a little disappointed in the sense that I didn't really pursue this, have this fantastic evolution into architecture. Architecture it's an emotionally taxing profession. And if you're not, and depending on what place you are in your life, if you have an issue balancing, then something is gonna give. And you have to figure out what it is at that point in time that's important to you. And at that point in time, I think we were going through a recession. And I was studying for my exam because I thought, well, let's just kind of complete this circle right here. But then I really didn't have the zeal. So I decided to go and continue my exploration of textiles in India because I had this list of countries that I wanted to go to. And India was probably one of my top 3 countries. So I went there and my only goal was to just explore and see. And so I traveled between Delhi and probably I went I started in Delhi and I went out west. Was that west? Yeah, probably I got to the desert. I got to the border, I think, of Pakistan. And that's where I stopped. And I came right back. People say when you go to India, you either love it or hate it. But I can tell you one thing, and maybe this is just time making me feel nostalgic again. Here's that word. It was probably the place that I just found to be so eye-opening. If I had thought of the most exciting, bizarre, sad, it kind of plays on, I think I felt like it touched all my emotions. It was a place that there were things there that made me sad. There were things that I felt when I saw things that I was like, I feel right at home. This is just like in Jamaica. And then there were things that were so bizarre to me and things that made me angry, things that made me happy, things that touched my soul. I felt so spiritual, I connected with that. So I think I went there looking for to do some research on these. I think there were like these priests that had carried these scrolls of fabric that told stories. I went to research that. And I probably, You know, that the one that once I got there, that went out of my head, because, you know, nothing prepares you for India, nothing. And it was probably the most fantastic experience I've ever had. I mean, I know that tells you nothing, but
it's like an Eat, Pray, Love thing for you, right? You seen that movie?
Yeah, and I read the book. You know what? I read the book in preparation to go, which was funny.
Wow.
Yeah, no, she was on a different path than I was, but I saw some similarities there. And, you know, you reminded me that I actually kept a journal. I need to go find that journal and read through. You know, I wrote in there every day when I was there, and I need to go and look back at that. But it as far as textiles go, it's just like a wonderland. It really is. I did a lot of touristy things, so it was pretty commercial too.
What about you and photography? Like, that's...
I mean, I've been a professional hobbyist, if there is such a thing. So sometimes it moves forward and sometimes it doesn't. I think when I lived in Barbados, I probably explored it the most, because I had a dedicated, like, I would wake up, do sunrise photo shoots, you know, afternoon photo shoots. So I did the most with it. And then when I lived in Atlanta previously, I did a lot of sort of architectural photography for the tours that we had. So that was a good experience. I think for me, I always like to explore sort of people, portraits, and places. And I think that was my one thing. I was like, you know, if I'm not doing architecture, I have to do photography. There's no other choice again. And so I think I really wanted to explore architecture, photography, and travel. I was like, you know, if I can create a scenario where all three come together, that would essentially be sort of my perfect environment. So I'm not quite there yet. It's still a journey. One of these days, they'll all come together. But for now, I mean, I still explore it as a hobbyist. And then I still do like some professional shoots for friends and families and other events and so forth. So it's ongoing. But I think one of my sort of really exciting life experiences was kind of like Shani. I mean, I didn't go for research, but I went with Global Bike to Tanzania. And I think just that immersion in the culture was, I mean, it was mind blowing, because it felt like being at home and experiencing another culture at the same time, because it was just that joy of seeing people happy with no matter what, you know? And I think part of that is lost here. So like, yes, you gain some things, you gain sort of a different lifestyle and so forth, but just the general harmony and joy of living, people get so caught up in, you know, things and jobs and this, and, you know, I think here most recently, one of my best times was my sabbatical from work. I took like 6 months off from like heavy duty work. And I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna live, you know? So I did little side gigs here and there in architecture and photography, but it was not a 9 to 5. So I woke up when I wanted. I went out, I was like, hey, maybe I should go out for lunch, go for a walk. And it was amazing. I'm like, maybe every 5 years I need a sabbatical, just to rejuvenate yourself. Because it's like, you know, architecture has the ability to empower you or to slowly kill you.
When it comes to racism, it's, yes, I experienced it, versus, is this what racism is? Is this, oh, okay, this is how it is. So I'm kind of curious how you guys experience in your travels and everything. Like, what are your takes on the U.S. and this? Because even in Trinidad, like, even as you have Blacks and you have Indians, right? And what I'm hearing now is getting worse with the politics there and the prime minister and election. Certain candidates said certain things. So I'm kind of curious about your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's the question of the hour right now. But I think growing up for me, I don't know that I directly experienced like racism to any degree. I think it's weird because, you know, in Trinidad, it's predominantly Black and Indian, but there's also Syrians, Chinese, Lebanese, you know, just a little bit of everybody. And so I think it got down to the point of where there were sometimes conversations about who's darker than who. So it was almost amongst the Black people.
Colorism.
You know, right, yeah, essentially, yeah. I wouldn't say I experienced it to the worst, but I know it was there and it did exist for some people. And there were people who, I guess, were also mixed races who felt that they didn't fit in either sort of the white bucket or the lighter bucket as well as the Black bucket. They're essentially people who we call Douglas, which is like a mix of races, like Indian and Black and so forth. But I think I didn't really experience anything per se until I got to the US. And I mean, it's subtle. The things that I've experienced are subtle or just like awkward conversations. Because I remember when I lived in Pennsylvania, like I was at the mechanic shop. And so there was me, and of course, everybody else was pretty much white. So I was like, hey, let me just make general conversation. I was like, oh, good morning, how you doing, or whatever. And the guy next to me proceeded to go into this sort of preamble. He was like, oh, how are you? I have Black friends. And he started telling me a story of how his neighbors is Black, and he talked to them. And then he was like, do you prefer to be called Black or African? And I was just like blown away, because I was like, how are we even here into this conversation right now? And I was just like, I just would like to be called by my name. I mean, like he even brought in, I think he brought in the word, do you prefer to be called Negro or Black? And I was like, whoa. I was like, I'd never heard, you hear the word Negro and different things, but it's in a different context. It's not like somebody in your face asking if you'd like to be called Negro or Black. So I think it's almost like a weird place for me to be sometimes, because then some of my friends might say things related to African Americans. They're like, oh, you don't seem like you're African American. And I'm like, well, I'm not. I'm sort of Afro-Caribbean. And so, yes, I'm Black. So I am subject to the same sort of things that everybody else here would be subject to, just from being Black in America. But I think from my upbringing, it's a little bit different. So yes, I have the same struggle to deal with in the workplace and everywhere else. But from my past, it's, I guess, sort of the way that I think about it is different. But I mean, all that's out the window with everything that's currently going on. Because I even told my mom, while she was growing up at home, going to secondary school, people were still struggling in the South. There was still racism, there was still all these things, but just by default of where we were born, we had a different experience. And so now I think it's very subtle being in a field that's male dominated, one, white male dominated, secondly, then also being a Black female in that field. So it's like, even though I may be in my firm sort of leading the architectural group, it's like going out into the field and engaging with clients, they still engage with you differently. So sometimes they still prefer to talk to somebody that looks like them. So they'll tell you, yes, okay, but then they will still try to have that conversation with somebody that looks like them. So it's like they let you in, but not fully. So you gotta kind of like push your way into some of these things. So what's your experience, Shani?
I'll co-sign with that, what Shelly-Anne mentioned there. I think for me, the buffer I set for myself is, and maybe it's a protective mechanism, I don't know. When I've been faced with situations where I've been either challenged on my knowledge or understanding of something, I always default to what's my goal here, And I always focus on that. Is my goal to solve this problem here so we can get the job done? Then if I can find my wherewithal in that moment, then I'll always revert to that. Say, well, I hear what you're saying, but we need to get this done. Because at the end of the day, and I try to, maybe it's the Capricorn in me. I don't know what it is. I try to be an even-keeled person and understand the perspective and really see what the most positive outcome is. Because the reality is, racism exists as a insecurity. And that's just kind of my perspective on it, because what does it benefit me to belittle or to think of someone as lesser than? We're all humans, right? But maybe by me being a minority, that's the only perspective I'm afforded. I don't know. I don't know what it is to be a white man. And maybe my thought process would be different. I'm just trying to live the best that I can and have a positive outcome for myself. So I try to focus on that. And that's really what I try to use to color any interaction I have with anybody that kind of challenges me based on the color of my skin, my ethnicity, where I come from. I think that's really what it is. And I try to live my life that way. What it has made me think about, though, it makes me question, have I always afforded everyone the kind of respect that I would want for myself? I mean, I do think about that, and I make sure that I'm cognizant of that anytime I've dealt with people, because I think racism exists also as a lack of consideration for another human,
Mm-hmm.
and a lack of consideration for a person's life and people who love that person. I use it as a lesson to myself to say, am I giving that to everybody? And I try to use it to make me a better person. And it's a difficult thing to process as someone who didn't grow up here, because sometimes it angers you to think that someone has the right to treat anyone that way. Where do you get that right? you know is the right only in your head? I think, to me, someone who does that, is not civil. You live in a civil society, but if you're acting that way, you're not a civil person. And it can be angering if you focus on it, but I just try to go back to what's my goal in any one situation. What's my goal? I try to avoid people like that.
Hey,
But
what?
you try to avoid situations. At the end of the day, I'm responsible for my life and for my own interactions in this world. And when I catch myself, I do give myself a break. I say, Shani, you can be angry about things, but you're responsible for your life, and you're responsible for your own interactions. And I try to be good to people, because if anything, it has allowed me to realize with humility that life is very fragile. And for someone who can spend their life hating that someone else, is very sad. You're not engaging in your own life if you spend your time hating somebody else.
It takes a lot of energy to hate.
Yeah, it does.
A lot of energy. And to remember to hate.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're like, oh, wait, I hate you. I'm sorry.
Well, for some people it's natural, I guess. Yeah, if you're born that way, not born that way, but if you grow up that way, and that's the way it's second nature, and it's hard to break that. I'm never gonna be the person to try and change someone, but it's always good to be aware of your environment and who you're dealing with, and to interact accordingly.
So did this happen when you came up here? This realization, this how you decide to your approach on things?
I mean, it definitely is colorism in Jamaica. You hear it in our music, Browning and stuff like that when you're growing up. So that there is certainly was a cultural preference for people who were lighter skin, but
You guys had like cake soap or something. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, well, no. I don't know if people use cake soap, but they use all kinds of other things that lighten their skin. And it's prevalent. It's part of our culture. And it's a part of a lot of other, I saw it in India too.
Yeah, India too.
Yeah,
and Africa. I'm parts of, I've never been to Africa. Maybe Shelly-Anne knows that, but, wouldn't know more about that. But I definitely see it. And you're never going to be in Jamaica. It's not like somebody's gonna look at you, oh, I hate you because of the colors, I'm gonna take you out. It's definitely not like that. It's certainly a preference for a skin tone, or I don't want to say good hair, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
All of that to me is a preference for something. You can like somebody's physical attributes for however you want, but it's never based on violence. It's never based on discounting your life. And so this is a new thing for me. And the only way I can navigate it and rationalize it in my head is to just say, well, not ignore it for sure, because you cannot. It makes you more creative. It makes you kind of dig into yourself to really think about who you are as a person, and what are your values? What is it that your outlook on life and people, and try to live the best you can and live by example. Expect to be treated how you treat other people.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's been interesting here. It's sort of like going to meetings and events and being sort of the only Black person there and the only female. Because when people start conversations, we're trying to do things for the Black community, it's almost like, oh, they're talking about me. But then it's like, on one end, you feel good because now you get to be a part of the conversation, to be able to engage and make that project better. But then sometimes you also question, am I here just because they needed a face? to go and take part in this. But I think being an architect offers a great opportunity to engage in some of these things, from sort of a planning for people in communities, spaces, buildings, all these things. So it offers us sort of a unique perspective to do that. But it's definitely challenging. It definitely comes up with lots of awkward conversation situations, because I've even had, friends that, I've been friends with for a while, but we never really talked about race per se, or the things. I guess some of it is more challenging with the events that have taken place recently. But it's definitely an uncomfortable conversation. But I guess we all have to find ways of sort of participating in it. Not necessarily, you don't want it to be confrontational, but you want it to be an opportunity to listen. Like, what is your perspective? Why do you feel this way? This is how I feel. This is how, when these things happen, this is how they make me feel. And so hopefully the other person is open to listen to you, because I think we got to do a lot of listening right now, because there are a lot of hurt people out there. And if you don't give somebody who's hurt by something an opportunity to speak, then you're forcing them to bottle it up and keep it away from you, because you want to stay in your bubble without knowing what else is going on. So.
See, Shelly-Anne,
you don't want to engage nobody. You're like,
oh. No. I'm not. I'll never say that. But the people who want to actually talk about it, I'm not worried about them. It's the people who don't want to engage in conversations is the problem. I think anybody, the folks that want to exact violence for their own reasons, those are the people that I don't understand. It's not like we're engaged in a war with some other entity that's trying to take your life away, or the life of your citizen, your country. It seems to be creating space for an unnecessary interaction. And that's what concerns me, that people feel the need to do that, to go out there and harm someone. And this is something that I think I never really engaged in until recently. You'll see Black History Month, all kinds of stuff. When you grew up in the Caribbean, you grew up Black, so you never really thought about it. It's great that they're celebrating it here. I don't really engage in it. I have never in the past, because, okay, I know what Black is. This is just how I felt. I never did anything special for Black History Month, unless some of my African American friends wanted to. Then I would. But again, I didn't feel like and I still don't think that I understand the African American history as much. I've been trying to educate myself a little bit more about it. Certainly, we experienced slavery in the Caribbean, but it's not in our lifetime, and so we don't have any residual because of that. We know it's part of our history.
You don't?
What?
Jamaicans, you don't have residuals?
In the sense that you're not really, your life isn't threatened, isn't actively potential.
It's different. It's too
different. I mean, it's part of your history, but it's not somebody that's gonna say, okay, well, you don't come over here because you're Black. We never experience anything like that.
But I think it's further back too, though, because it'll be like your great something. But I think here, like especially in the South, it's literally like somebody's grandmother or like great grandmother was working on a plantation or was an owner of something. So I think it's a lot closer to the surface. I think at home, we do like Emancipation Day and stuff like that. So there are celebrations that acknowledge certain things.
Yes.
And, now the Indians have, it's been going on for a couple of years, Indian Arrival Day, for when the Indians arrived as indentured servants and all that. And now they're Chinese celebrations. So I think there are celebrations and stuff, but I think kind of like what Shani is saying, for me, it's kind of like you feel like a little bit of an outsider, kind of. So it's like, I myself don't know the full history. Like I know the general history of everything, but I don't necessarily go very deep in it since my education wasn't here. But I mean, obviously in Trinidad, we still do, social studies and other things. So we learn a broad history of the world itself. So about slavery and all those things, but I always feel like it's closer to the surface here.
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of twofold, because when I went to Trinidad one time, and my cousin, he was in school, and I was like, come here, let me see what you learned in school, sir. And so I went and looked at his books, and he was learning about the slave trade. And I was just, he's like 8. And I was like, I didn't learn about the slave trade till I was like 16, 17. And here you go, learning about it is the education in itself. It's the fact that a lot of our history has been whitewashed. A lot of the U.S. history has been whitewashed versus in the Caribbean. It is what it is, you know, like, and so how centralized and how he had to learn like all the islands in the Caribbean and like, and I'm
the
like
capitals and the prime ministers and everything.
Right. And so I didn't learn any of, definitely not the Caribbean. I barely know how many states there are. It's 2 totally different histories. And another thing too, your emancipation is totally different from our emancipation, because the British left and they just left. They may own some land still, and maybe, what do you call it, the Duchess and Duke may come to visit.
Well, they have the name, so the history is there from the naming and some of the buildings. And,
I mean, same here, like Prince George's County, like it's Prince George, you know. But it's different when you still have another race, other Eurocentric has been like dominated. Like you said before, Shani, like when both of you guys were in school, you learned Europe history, but the thing is too, you also learned other histories as well. Versus here in the States, my education in architecture school, it was like strictly European. Like you had Egypt, and then you had the Taj Mahal and the other 7 wonders of the world, and that was it. Like that, everything was centered in Europe. And you question, like, and that's the struggle I had with architecture in school. And that's why I ended up like transferring 3 times and all that stuff, because it was very difficult for me to, I knew I loved it, but the education, like something inside me was just like, why am I not learning? Like I should be loving architectural history, but it's so limited. And then it's like, where am I from? Like, what about my Caribbean history? Like, what about my African history? All that's just been, Egypt, pyramids, and everything else was all vernacular. Your education in listening to you guys was like super rich. And I just wished I had that. But
well, I mean, you have that by extension through your family and some of the story. I mean, it's not pure, but you could learn some of that from them and what they experienced. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that to me, that's one of the things I celebrate the most and I enjoy most being from Trinidad. It's almost like being born in the right place at the right time and being able to sort of have that history and that culture. Because I mean, I'm sure there's lots of cultures everywhere, but to me, it's like being in Trinidad and having that cultural infusion from so many different countries and places all at the same time was incredible. It's like the amount of festivals and events and just different things that you can experience. I mean, I haven't really experienced that anywhere else. Because even like here, when it's like Diwali, like I go to the temple that's close by to me, and you know they have the show and the lights, but usually I'm like one of a handful of Black people there because it's all Indian. But in Trinidad, it would have almost been like everybody there, you know? You almost wonder whose festival is it, because there's so many of everybody.
One thing there's a couple of things I love about Trinidad. You close your eyes and everybody sounds the same. You open your eyes and there's a guy that looks like, he's Chinese, and another guy that, could be Venezuelan. And then, like you that's the beauty of it. Or even like, what do you call it? Oh, you call that thing that happened? Parang? Is that yeah. That, I mean, that alone, like that celebration.
There's like a festival or an event or something to celebrate for almost every occasion.
And everybody's
so
there.
Part, yeah.
I don't know if that's like in Jamaica or not, but
what in terms of No, we're just straight up. No, I'm just kidding. Well, when I guess the demographics of Jamaica, it's not like Trinidad where. See, I haven't checked the latest demographics, but
it's been gentrified.
Oh, well, really? Yeah, I haven't been back in so long, but I really need to go back and check now. But growing up, we were very aware our history. And I think by no means, certainly go ahead and fact check me, anyone listening to this. I'm not spitting facts for sure. Just memories of growing up, that we did have a small like what Shelly-Anne mentioned, we do have a smaller, we have a small population of Chinese, but for, I'd say at least 90% of our ethnicity is from Africa, from African heritage. And so a lot of our rituals and festivals, etc., revolve around that. So we probably didn't have as much of diversity as Trinidad does in that regard. But I think we are certainly connected to our Caribbean brethren, and we have taken on things like carnival, which I'm probably blasphemous by saying we suck at, but one thing for sure, the Caribbean School of Architecture was that place for us to have grown. I wouldn't be in Jamaica, probably wouldn't have interfaced with my Caribbean brethren as much, as if I hadn't gone to that school. That's the other thing too, because it's the Caribbean School of Architecture called out for a reason, because that was where a lot of the other Caribbean islands, the students would come and go to school there. So I did get exposed to the other countries and islands. I didn't go to Trinidad, unfortunately. So that needs to be on my list.
You haven't been there yet?
I know.
What? And you got a friend from Trinidad? Oh my goodness, that is just...
Yeah, 2 people on this call.
I know. Well, yeah, right.
I'll
well, first, I'm sorry, but I have to go to Jamaica first.
Well, yes, of course. You got to go home first.
I have to go home first. But I was very aware of, so I became aware of the history of the other islands, and know just by extension that the history of the people there. I always loved, we were closest to Cuba. I always loved, I grew on I have a special affection for Latin music and just that culture in general. So I think the Caribbean itself is pretty varied because we were colonized, and so we do have remnants of that. And it's, just learning from our Caribbean history, that's something that we celebrate, but not as much in Jamaica. So, we do end up having to travel to really get more exposed.
Yeah, I think that's one of the good things too. So we definitely have to give a shout out to the University of Technology, and by extension, the Caribbean School of Architecture, for sort of that foundation, as Shani mentioned. And I think one of the great things that I enjoy seeing now is that some of my classmates and the people in the years before me are actually going back as professors.
Mm-hmm.
Been out, they've worked, and so now they're going back. So I think that's also a good touch to have some of that new perspective being infused into the school as well. So when I worked I can't say in Trinidad because didn't work that close to the beach, but in Barbados, I could actually go to the beach and eat lunch. And I was like, wow, this
yeah, they have it, that country right there. If I were to settle somewhere outside of Jamaica, that probably would be it right there. Because they have it set up nice. It's small enough that you can get where you want to go.
Is it like Tobago?
And you have access to all the beach.
Yeah, it's probably like a Tobago. Tobago has, it's a lot more mountains, so it depends on where you're going. You gotta go through the mountain range, but yeah, you still have access to a beach or somewhere with a view of a beach or something within probably at least like half an hour, 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that part is cool. I would give anything to just have some relaxation spaces or gaps in work. Like, when you listen to the news and people are like, oh, with my newfound time, I'm exploring this hobby. I'm like, what newfound time? I just lost more time. I'm like,
yeah, that work-life balance is like, what's that? But I think too that, especially for, I don't know about other minorities, but for Black people in this field, I think more ownership and autonomy is needed for us to get where we need to go. Because if you sit down and work in a majority firm, and there are a lot of firms out there where you don't even see one Black person, but it's just always not that you're going to completely avoid racial issues when it comes to our profession. I mean, they can say they want to be inclusive all they want, but at the end of the day, there is a bigger system and society that they're part of. And the only way we're going to have any autonomy and kind of maximize potential is if we kind of take ownership and do our own thing. And I think entrepreneurship is really what has allowed a lot of Black people to make their own way and not be tied back or held back. So I think it's good that you're doing this, and if it allows you to stay in architecture and explore and really be what you want to be in this field, it's certainly a good thing. I support anybody who is living their dream, because that's all anybody wants to do.
Just live the life. I mean, I love doing nothing. I would, if it wasn't for you, I would still be in bed. I roll out of bed. I was like, oh, I got to do the Zoom thing.
You know what's funny? So I was telling one of my coworkers, I was like, she called me probably like around 7. And I was like, I'm just exhausted. I'm like, I keep going. Like, I just logged off from work. And now I have like a call with my friend who's doing like something to help celebrate Black men, like a meeting. And so she was like, oh, it's all your extracurricular activities that has you so tired. And I'm like, no, it's work. Did you not just hear me say I signed off for the computer at 7, which is like an hour and a half after I should have? But people almost like highlight your extracurricular activities. And I'm like, that's what keeps me going to want to do the 9 to 5. The fact that I have these other little bubbles here that can bring me joy sometimes.
Yeah. You know what? I wonder what our lives would be like if we didn't have to focus so much on our ethnicity and be bothered with it.
Oh, it would be freeing. I'm serious. Like, I think I would be so much more creative if I didn't have to think I'm a Black woman. My mind would be like, it'll be huge.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like our brain has this kind of ethnicity like caches. We need to clean it. We need to clean it out. I don't know. I've only been recently thinking about it. Well, you can't avoid it really. Sometimes I'd like to put a head in the sand, but you can't avoid it. And you just think to yourself, man, when we're in the Caribbean, we didn't have to be thinking about none of this.
Thinking about any of that stuff. I mean, there's other things to think about. Like, you gotta think about stupid people and violence and
crime and other things.
We're still right here. We're thinking about that. In addition to,
but it's a different type. Like, it's just different. Like, I like to call 911 for an emergency. And they go up.
You call them?
No, I'm just saying if someone's having, a medical emergency.
No, my friends are like, I know one of my friends, she's always like, look, if I pass out, don't call no ambulance. You get some water, throw it on my face, get me together. Like, you know how expensive the ambulance is?
Well, now in the pandemic world, still, like, this is the basic stuff. Like, just.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd still tell people, I'm like, look, don't call nobody for no wellness check. Call this friend, this friend, this friend, and you tell them come over here. I don't need no wellness check.
Yeah, you're right.
We all need a wellness check. Trust me.
From your friends, not from
your friends, not from the cops.
Oh, yeah. Well, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that was always the way, though, but I guess I didn't really think about it until recently with all the stuff in the news. And maybe it's just me, but sometimes I think now I've learned to be very skeptical about everything. I think when I came here, I was all starry-eyed, and I probably would have overlooked. I'm pretty sure I overlooked and didn't even notice some of the subtle racism that was going on. I just probably saw it as a block and say, okay, well, I didn't get this. Let me move on. And maybe
that was being blissful, though. Ignorance is blissful.
It is. And that's what you get when you come from the Caribbean and haven't been schooled in the way things are. And so in a way, it may end up getting you in a lot of places because you're not kind of bogged down worrying about why something didn't happen. You just move on to the next. But then after a while you sit down and you think about it, you're like, oh, okay, well, this is what African Americans are talking about. This is what
but I think that same bliss thing, I mean, I was probably in bliss while my brother wasn't, because like even when I talk to him about stuff now, he's like, no, I got pulled over a lot. And I was like, really? I didn't realize it was like that much. But so yeah, stuff was going on. It depends on who you are. He experienced stuff. I experienced some with him, and then I experienced some subtle ones because mine wouldn't be like as heavy as his might have been. But yeah, I mean, without talking to people, you just never know what they went through.
Mm-hmm. That's very true.
Yeah. When you see African Americans or other Black people doing crazy stuff, it's why are you doing that? That could lead to a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like the other day, I was going outside, and so I saw like a whole group of people just passing, and I'm like, that's not usual for my complex. Like, who are all these people walking by? It's like 10 people passed. And then when I got out, it was like a bunch of youths, like teenagers, just walking through the complex. They didn't live here at all. They just walked through, went to the other end, and jumped over the fence. And I was like, why? Why would you even do that in this current time that we're living through? You know,
But
like
they're just being kids, and you should be able to just be a kid.
I
mean, you know, many times when I was just a kid, I walked through people's property, you know, climb over fence. I mean, if
that's in the Caribbean, right?
yeah,
Not over here.
of course. If they see you on the property, they tell you to bomb a clot. You know what I mean? Most of the time, they'll just kind of shoo you away, or they don't even pay you any mind. But you know, here, you know, it's it's a lot more serious, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like if I had a teenager now, I'd be like, look, I understand that that's what you want to do. That's childhood, you know, going exploring. Just try to minimize that exploration, right?
Yeah, we want you to come home. That's the thing. We want you to come
home. And that's the realness of the country you're living in. So
yeah,
I mean,
I know one of my friends had a wedding, and it was like North Georgia kind of mountains area, out in the woods. And so I drove to the wedding, and my GPS is like, okay, turn right. And I'm like, this is like a gravel road. Like, where are we going? I was like, okay, I'll turn down this gravel road, drive, you know, some feet or whatever, see what's up. And it kept going, this gravel road. And I was trying to call, well, of course I can call her because she's in the wedding. And I'm trying to like navigate, you know, just minutes before the wedding. And I'm like, okay, who can I call to find out if I'm in the right place? Because I don't want to be down a gravel driveway that leads to somebody's house. And so it kept going. It must have been like a whole mile. And I was just like, boy, well, this is it, God. I mean, I can't turn around fast enough. So whatever happens down this road, it's exhausting to have to worry about stuff like that.
Was it the destination? Was it?
It was like down the end.
I'll be so mad. How dare you have a wedding in the middle of the woods and we're all Black people?
I mean, it was like, no, she wasn't Black. I was the Black guest. But
I mean, I could have read that one.
I would have been mad. I said, what is your problem?
No, Black people know better than that. But I mean, it was like a great area with views and, you know, pool and the barn. It was like this barn setting. I'm like, this is cute once you get here. My way here was worrying. I was like up these windy roads all over the place. I was just like.
You guys left during the night?
Yeah, well, yeah, then the wedding ends in the night. So I was like, hey, who leaving now? I'm like, I'm leaving with you. Let's go. I'm going to follow your car back out of here.
You need to be part of a contingent of 10.
Caravan, yeah. I was like, I need a caravan to get out of here. I'm like, yeah, I think that was one of my challenges because when I worked in South Carolina, like I did a lot of road trips mainly to Charleston, but to other places like in South Carolina. And so that was one conversation that I had with the principal in my office. I was like, look, I don't feel comfortable driving to these places and coming back late at night. And their conversation was like, oh, everybody does it. Like everybody in the company does these trips. You should be fine. And I'm like, look, I'm telling you, I don't feel comfortable. So I either want to stay in a hotel till the next day or not go on the trips. And he felt that I was making too much of a big deal of it. There was nothing to be worried about because, of course, his daughter drove around by herself. I'm like, your daughter doesn't look like me. It's not going to be the same experience.
You told him that?
Yeah.
And what he said when you said that?
He was like, he still kept pushing the issue. There's nothing to worry about. You know, it's not people. He's like, you're a woman. People will help you if something happens to your car. And I was just like, this is crazy. So after I mentioned it a couple times to him, then he was like, well, we need to talk to HR. And the HR lady was like, oh, I drive there all the time. I go, travel to Charleston, other places.
What was the point in talking to HR?
It came to a stalemate. It was he was trying to say that it's probably bigger than him and that, you know, not all the projects could afford me having a hotel to stay there. And so after talking to HR, it came to a stalemate. HR was like, well, you know, let us know what you want to do. And I'm like, what do you mean?
You already did.
I'm like, I don't feel comfortable. So that's why I was just like, this clearly is going nowhere. So just don't put me on these projects unless it includes a plane flight. Like I could do out of state projects because I'm going to get on a plane and go. But, then it became an awkward situation because of course I was like a project architect manager. And so it's like, how do you not go to the project, right? So, but then of course, then they had downsizing. And of course, if you have a controversial candidate, who better to downsize, right? So.
Yeah, and I mean, you ultimately have to do what's in your best interest, safety, because they're not in your shoes, so he's not qualified to evaluate that situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was made ever so clear to me one time. When I was teaching at Kansas State. It was Black History Month, and the students there, the Black students there, put together this kind of diversity conversation. And there was this one white faculty member who came there. He was not really listening to what the students were saying. They said every time they walk out of their door, they think about the color of their skin. They're reminded that they're Black. And he said he doesn't get it. Every time he walks out, he just walks out. And so that's the point. You have the luxury of not having to think about that, but he still didn't get it. Everything, it's a lesson for everybody, really, because we really can't expect a white person, a white man, white woman, whatever it is that's not like us, to understand our fears and concerns. We're ultimately responsible for that and have to act accordingly because they can't protect us. We are the ones responsible for that. Even if they're well-intentioned, and a lot of them are, but the reality is that it just takes one bad person or one person who means you harm, and that goes for any race, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think it's really horrible. But like what happened in Rwanda, which is in like our time, pretty much. To me, stuff like that is incredibly scary because I know everybody thinks that we could never get to that place here. But in the back of my mind, it's kind of like when they're shooting in a movie theater. Now you go in, you look for the exits first.
You're talking about the genocide?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So it's kind of like if something like that were to kick off in the US right now, in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, okay, is there one person of sort of another race or something that I can trust that will hide me in their basement or somewhere? And, it's hard to think because it's like sometimes you think, okay, it might be this one person. If something kicks off, hey, I need you to hide me. Will they do that, or will they feel that it's putting them and their family at too much risk, But I mean, I just pray to God nothing like that happens here, but it's real because a lot of the things we never thought were possible are happening right now.
But I think part of it too is that it's always been there.
Well, yeah, it's just coming out.
I think we never really realize it because it's here, and you're like, okay, well, where did this come from? Well, it was always there.
Yeah.
And it just now got a little bit of fertilizer and water and
and
a little support. And you're right.
A little spark.
Lighter fluid.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, on that note, ladies, I'll let you go. It's almost 2:00.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you for sharing it with us.
So much.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, listeners. I have an exciting announcement. I decided to launch a membership program for the show, where you have a chance to support me and the show directly. I love creating the show, and it means the world to me that you all tune in to keep hearing me week after week. But it takes an immense amount of time and energy to produce. I want to keep the show going, and I want to invest in its growth. And I also want you to become a partner with me in this journey. That's why I'm excited to give you a chance to officially become a supporter of the show at glow.fm/archispolly, ARCHISPOLLY, or by clicking the link in the show notes. It's quick and easy. It takes less than 30 seconds and just takes clicking a link in the show notes and using Apple or Google Pay. You don't have to create any new logins, and you can contribute as much or as little as you like. If this show is part of your day or week and you like what I'm doing, then visit glow.fm/archispolly, all one word, and support me and the show in any way you can today.